of uh, marginalized kind of political protest movement like the Satanic Temple could be considered when we're confronting these kinds of general kind of cultural issues. Nonviolent tactics are the most effective. Violent groups, they tend to very quickly lose the support of the public. They tend very quickly to lose their own voice on their own terms. They create a kind of general fear in the population. They create a real backlash. They tend to fall apart in amongst themselves. And nonviolent movements just have a much better chance of putting forward a sustained, lasting message that really has an effect and really meets its intended goals. I mean, these aren't questions we approach just on some kind of knee-jerk moralistic reaction. I mean, I suppose we would rethink our position on whether we want to completely work within legal means. If the legal environment changed to our disadvantage sufficiently that we felt the laws were oppressive and unworkable. But as for now, there would be no excuse with the Satanic Temple because, as I said, on paper, we're a secular nation. Constitutionally, we have equal rights as any other religious voice. We have the system working in our favor. It would just be absolutely foolish for us to pull some kind of actions which could be easily have us deemed a terroristic organization or strike fear into people who might otherwise embrace the message we're putting forward. And of course, we don't want to live in a more violent world. We don't want to live in a world of more social unrest. So there would be really no justifying us making the world a worse place in the name of some kind of increased equity, which should already be in place, and we're just trying to remind people of.
Mm-hmm. And I'm going to ask about one more thing. Believe it or not, when we have these talks that Steve and I are just enthralled in, that's when time goes by the fastest. We're already at the hour and 15-minute mark, and I want to leave time for questions from the audience that have super chatted. We'll get to those here in just a second. But I guess, and I'm sure that you deal with this on a daily basis, probably one of the criticisms that's levied against you guys is why push for the change in status? Why become a religion when that's the thing that you sought to sort of be the antithesis of? How would you answer that?
Well, I would start out by saying we never denied being a religion. From the very beginning, we sought to separate superstition from religion. And I've always had a problem with the anti-religion rhetoric. And that's been very difficult for some atheists to embrace or understand. There's been some real pushback there. But to me, religion doesn't mean theism. It doesn't mean supernaturalism. It doesn't mean superstition. Jainism is a non-theistic religion. Buddhism, Confucianism. Religion can have all these kinds of positive elements without the superstition involved. And as I've said, we have this kind of subculture. We have this kind of identity. We have this metaphorical narrative placement that kind of contextualizes us within our cultural environment. And we feel we have all the enriching aspects of a religion while not having the superstition involved. And furthermore, religion enjoys certain privileges and exemptions in the United States that shouldn't only be available to people who claim they believe in these intellectually insulting fairy tales. Nonetheless, from the beginning, we did say that we were not going to seek that recognition for tax exemption because we rejected the idea that churches should be tax exempt. They should pay their taxes, right? And also, we wanted to be able to be involved in politics without violating the Johnson Amendment. And we kind of naively thought, given precedent of recent years, that nobody in the courts would question our claims to being religion, because the courts have, in recent times, just given a carte blanche to religious claims and haven't questioned them at all. Look at the Hobby Lobby case, where nobody even asked in the Supreme Court how it is that a private corporation could hold a religious viewpoint, or where was any scriptural support for this notion that a corporation holding a religion should not provide healthcare benefits that provided contraceptive benefits to its employees. They just said it was a religious claim, and that was taken at face value. I guess we had this kind of notion that the courts would be more consistent in religious claims than to tolerate somebody coming in and saying, I don't think these guys are a real religion. We were wrong. Like I said, with our Baphomet campaign in Arkansas, which was our claim to put up a satanic monument on the same public grounds where they put up a Ten Commandments monument, the state constructed its entire defense on the idea that we're not a real religion. We knew, for one thing, that if we got the recognition from the IRS being the only federal agency that has a religious test, that those claims would definitely not be taken seriously by the court. The court couldn't, even if they were inclined to, then call that into question. So that saves us quite a deal of argument in the courts, and that costs a lot of money to begin with. But I was also getting nervous that the window was kind of closing on a time in which we could, if we wanted to, be declared a religion by IRS standards, when Trump announced that he was going to look for some way to revoke the status of the Church of Scientology. Now, as much as I might dislike them, I thought it was a bizarre thing for him to say, and it made me wonder what kind of justification they would come up with for narrowing the definition of what a religion is to try to define us out of it. And that could actually be a first step into trying to denigrate our own claims, the more kind of popular we get for taking on the claims of evangelicals in the courts. So we didn't want that window to close. And then it was really at the point, though, where Trump announced that he was going to go after the Johnson Amendment entirely. And for anybody who doesn't know, the Johnson Amendment is what is put into place to deny tax-exempt churches the ability to involve themselves in politics. Trump announced that he was going to destroy the Johnson Amendment, and then he shortly thereafter announced that they weren't going to pursue any enforcement of the Johnson Amendment. So that was the point where we realized that we are in asymmetric warfare, that where the odds are stacked against us in this culture war, and we need any advantage we can take. And we felt also our time was maybe limited on being able to apply for that before that definition of religion was narrowed. And to be clear, I think if they narrow the definition of religion, it will, any way they do it will arguably be unconstitutional and could go to the courts. But I don't think we'd have standing to challenge that if we hadn't already been approved as a religion, had it taken away. So I felt it was really kind of necessary for us at this time to apply for that status, and we did, and we got it.
Very cool.
For a 501c3, what do they use for? Do they use Durkheim's definitions of religion for a unified system of beliefs and practices?
I don't think they use. I think they have their own kind of unique 14 points where you fulfill these certain requirements if you do a number of these certain things. And I was worried that maybe they had too much subjective latitude, because they tell you that you don't need to fill all these requirements, but you need to fill a number of them. They don't give you an exact metric, right? So it's still left to some kind of subjective interpretation. But when you look at those requirements, we meet, I think, we arguably meet all of them. There's one standard which is obviously geared towards Christian groups, where it says if you have like some kind of Sunday school for children. And I was thinking we arguably meet that standard with our after-school Satan Club, which we set up in opposition to evangelical groups going into public schools. The fact that it doesn't take place on Sunday, I think, really can't be held against us. It was their critical thinking classes without any type of religious teaching that we've set up for children. But the critical thinking is something that we feel inspired to advance based upon our own religious tenets. So that one's a little shaky, but otherwise, I thought it would be very difficult for them to deny us because we do fulfill so many. We have a place of, as they would call it, worship, even though we kind of we don't really agree with that terminology. But we also have, regular, as they term it, congregations, in this kind of body of literary work and all these other types of practices and other things that we were able to point to that we fulfill the requirements of. So I don't really feel that the IRS would have had any excuse to turn us down. That doesn't mean I felt entirely confident that we would get the approval as quickly as we did, but I was happy to see we didn't have to fight too hard.
Congrats. You guys definitely deserve it. Okay, so what we're going to do now is I'm going to go through these super chats. There's quite a few. I'm going to, whether it be to whoever in the panel the question is asked to, let's just try to keep the answers. Steve, there's a couple for you on here too. Just try to keep the answers as succinct as possible, just because of the sheer volume of the amount of them. And then we will let Lucien tell us once again about the film and where you can see it, and where you can find out more. We start out with Reed Charbonneau says, how's the movie doing? I love your work, Lucien. I guess now would be a good time to plug the film.
Yeah, well, the movie's doing great. It's gotten almost universally good reviews. Like I said, I think the real backlash will happen once it's streaming and everybody else sees it. It's increased our profile and my own popularity. I'm getting recognized all the time, much to my my discomfort. But also, I think people should realize, we didn't make that film, and we're not getting any money from it. So it's great to see it doing well, and we're happy. It's a good film. I like it a lot. But people asking us these kinds of questions of where it's at and everything, you kind of have to check with the distributor Magnolia and their website, hailsatanfilm.com, and realize that we're not the ones making the posters and the advertising and things like that, because we do get a lot of questions that are better geared towards the filmmakers and the distributor.
Excellent. Prophet of Cthulhu says, how is the lawsuit with Netflix going?
Oh, that was settled. Pretty quickly. And you can make of that what you will regarding the legitimacy of the claim. But as part of the settlement, of course, I just really can't talk about it other than to say that it was amicably settled.
Perfect. The Stoned Apostate, that's a super chat without a message. Thank you. Jay Lee said, aren't you guys just successful trolls who aim for a pure secular society?
Well, we do aim for a secular society, but that's separate from the question of whether we're purely trolling. But no, I think sometimes people are disappointed that we have this authentic attachment to Satanism. But I think if they learn about it, they might become a bit more comfortable with that as well. And all I can say is check out the material we have on thesatanictemple.com.
Kuyasa says, what is the reaction of the temple to the recent crazy abortion bans coming from southern state legislators? And does the temple have anything planned for that?
I have an official statement on that, and it is just 3 words: we will fight. And I encourage people to check out religiousreproductiverights.com. It shows our approach to this. It shows how we've already approached abortion restrictions in the past and how we can approach it in the future. I mean, it's an issue of having a plaintiff in standing in these certain states, but it's also an issue of just having the resources to take it on. When we took on 2 cases in Missouri, we just did not find pro bono support. We thought we would, because we thought there'd be a lot of lawyers just really kind of willing to make the religious exemption claim from against abortion